walking to have dinner or go play at the playground. So really love it here and have been on the planning commission since it's probably been about 15 years. So I replaced Jack Draxler when he got elected to the State House of Representatives. Somebody thought it was a good idea to throw me on the planning commission. But anyway, I'm still there and chairman this year and have thoroughly enjoyed my public service and just getting to meet great folks in various capacities here in the county and try to help preserve some of the things we all appreciate about where we live.
I'm Gina Worthen, and I grew up in Granger, which most of you now know to be West Valley City, and came to Utah State, met my husband, he's from Hyde Park, so we settled here. I love it here. I live in North Logan. I love North Logan, great people, beautiful place, plus I love the pumpkin walk. Something interesting about me is I happen to love Huey Lewis and the News, the 80s rock group, if you remember them. And I actually met Huey Lewis when I was a teenager. And if any of you want to hear the story, I'd be happy to tell you about me hiding in the bushes waiting to meet Huey Lewis. And, can't think of anything else interesting, so I'll toss it to Melinda. Oh, wait, something interesting. We went to high school together, but not here. So it's kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, I grew up down, well, mostly Granger. We moved a lot. By the time I was 20, I went back and counted, and we had moved 20 times by the time I was 20. Then I came up here to school, USU, met my husband, and stayed. And so we live in the house that he grew up in. And I have a degree in accounting. Mostly didn't work while I was raising 6 kids. I'm working at Hyde Park City right now. I was on that planning commission for a little bit, but now I'm secretary of the planning commission at Hyde Park City. I've done that for a few years, and I've been on this one for less than a year. Just found out he's from Hyde Park too.
Carl Ward, grew up in Hyde Park, mostly in Hyde Park, between Montana and Idaho before that. But on the Cache County Council, let's see, where I live. We live in Logan itself, and we love it because it's close to everything. I don't have to drive very far, but I do miss the rural atmosphere that I grew up in. I appreciated that very much. I grew up, like I say, in Hyde Park. I was on the Logan City Planning Commission for 13 years, so I have a good feel for what you have to deal with and serving in a quasi-judicial role, trying to deal with the codes and things that we as council members put together. Hopefully we can make this a little easier for you as we meet and find out what challenges you're facing as we go through these things. I served, I worked for Zions Bank for 40 years, and so I knew BioWest before Christmas.
You did, that's right.
And I appreciate
Carl's our banker. Yeah.
Used to be. Retired now. Yep. But so anyway, I'm just excited to be able to meet with you all.
All right, I'm Jason Waterson. I live in beautiful downtown. Actually, I'm on the wrong side of the tracks in Benson, but if we had tracks, my family has came to Cache Valley in 1860, and we're still on the same piece of ground there as they first homesteaded way back then, and so fairly deep roots there. Say on the family of 5 kids and only lost one out of the valley so far. But my day job, I work for Utah Local Governments Trust, the insurance company for the county and the vast majority of local government agencies, really all of them in Cache Valley and all around the state. And so my job there is I work as a risk manager and try to help prevent losses and prevent those bad problems that can happen with local government agencies. So as far as after off the clock, my family runs some recreation businesses out in Benson, hunting club as well as canoe livery out there. So we kind of participate on the agricultural side, the recreation, and various different things. Love Cache Valley and want to keep it as good as we possibly can.
I'm Nolan Gunnell. Grew up in Mount Sterling, Wellsville area. My roots in Cache Valley are deep. Both my maternal and paternal grandparents were the first that came to Wellsville and settled. So I have bought the family farm from both sides and farm. I grew up on a dairy farm, learned to hate cows, but I love the farm side and the dirt side. So love Cache Valley. I'm still working just to support 4 kids who have moved out and still think I support them. So that's what I do. Yeah, so.
Nathan Dowds, grew up in Young Ward, moved there from Vancouver, British Columbia when I was about 2. So my wife and I built a house there on my dad's place about 6 years ago in the middle of our apple orchard. So that's why I enjoy being out there. A nice little place. My day job, I'm the general manager of Cache Water District. I've been on the planning commission for about 3 months. So pretty new there. But happy to be there.
And Paul Borup on the county council. I was born here in Logan. My mom's side of the family's from here. My grandpa was an ag econ professor up at Utah State for pretty much the entirety of his career. I was here until first grade when we moved down to Augusta, Georgia. So I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, but would come out to Logan every summer with my grandparents. And I got the completely wrong idea of what Cache Valley's like just coming in the summertime. But I grew to love it. Came out here, went to Utah State, met my wife. For most of my career, I worked for insurance companies all over the country, and then decided instead of living in Boston or Hartford, Connecticut, I joined a insurance brokerage out of Salt Lake about 5 years ago, where I was able to move back to Logan to raise my kids. So I've been here for off and on for the entirety of my life, and just absolutely love it, and appreciate the opportunity we have to meet with the planning commission today. I mean, y'all do a fantastic job and make our job all that much easier with what you do. I know it's not a lot of fun sometimes, so we appreciate you and the opportunity to get together.
You guys back there?
I think we're the peanut gallery.
Yeah, I should be there.
I'm Barbara Tidwell. I've lived in Logan for 50 years. Lived in the same house for 45 years, and I live in just a block west of the Smith's Marketplace there, and that's where our home is. I don't have any children. I've been on the Cache County Council for 6 years now. I'm the chair this year. I love Logan. I lived some of my life down in California, moved to Utah when I was 13 years old, and then when I got married, I come up here. I love the mountains. I love the accessibility. The canyon's just right there. I love the outdoor. I love the recreation. I like the fact that we can look forward to 50, 75 years, and what kind of legacy are we going to leave our children and grandchildren, and what we can do to best satisfy that. I worked with Carl. I retired from Zions Bank after 33 years, and I'm now a personal trainer at a gym here in town, and I just celebrated my 50th wedding anniversary last week.
I'm Brandon Spackman. I grew up on a little dairy farm in Richmond, Utah. Got married and I moved to Smithfield. My wife wouldn't let me build on the farm. She said, didn't think I'd ever come home, but what she was wrong is we would have built there. I would have been home more often. So we moved to Smithfield. Last year we bought a different home. We're just on the east side of Smithfield there. I run and operate a trucking company here in Cache Valley. I still help out on the farm a little bit. I gained a great appreciation for dirt and farming and agriculture from my youth, and I appreciate it. I try to, I still work with my dad a little bit there. So my fun, a lot of my fun revolves around my kids. I have 3 in high school right now. They all play sports. Then I've got 2 younger kids that we're trying to keep up with. So there's never a dull moment. So.
Dave Erickson, I haven't gone very far. As a matter of fact, about 2 weeks ago, we just bought my parents' home back from them. And so I own the home that I was raised in. But born and raised just north of Smithfield, still farming the farm out there. I raised on dairy cows, and I like cows.
I had too many when I was a kid.
They kick, but they don't talk
Do
back.
you milk them today? Still like it?
We've raised 4 kids, all married, empty nested, which is sweet. Not to get rid of them, but it's just nice to be empty nested, and they're all married off and doing good. I taught at Skyview High School for 31 years. Was an ag teacher. Thoroughly enjoyed it. If Brandon and Brady, if they ever do anything wrong, they have someone to blame. Please blame me. But no, it's been a great. Now I'm retired from there, and I still do work for Western Ag Credit and farm the 300 acres, and I go to church every now and then. And I don't know what else. My wife says that she says the best thing that she likes about me is my butt, because that's all she sees on the way out. But that's our retirement. I wish I was going to Hawaii for my 50th, but I know my wife would leave me there. Anyway, enjoyed it. I very much invested within unincorporated county, and just had good experiences. Oh, I've also been on planning and zoning. I was on the board of adjustments for a lot of years, and so had good experiences.
Lane Parker, and I'm not sure how many years you've been on planning zoning now, but I really enjoyed that and get to know more about the the land use side. But I was born in Ogden, but we now live on the ranch. I've been on the ranch now, 45 years since I got back from my mission, and I'm basically on the ranch. At home's off the ranch a little bit. We're still there on the same place that my granddad had, and Noah and I are cousins. My grandfather, his mother were brother and sister.
His side of the family got all the looks and all the money, so.
Yeah.
I don't know what I got.
Pretty good statement.
Yeah. But so we go back a lot of ways to the valley, and I still run cattle on the mountain above because he doesn't want cows.
Yeah.
So above his house. But when our ranch now is when I got home from my mission, there was a single lane dirt road going into the ranch. It was about a mile from the closest paved road. Nobody knew it existed, and now we have 10th West in front of the ranch that we have to wait to climb on and off that. My father was a county commissioner when they built 10th West and negotiated with the DOT to do whatever they were going to do and get that done. So I've seen all this growth around us. My brother being some of the worst offenders, he helped develop a bunch of my hay ground is now houses that barges me on one side. And so I'm being sucked in. That newest water ski park is now on the other side of the ranch. Between us and the Logan River, we thought there's no way that that'll ever get developed because it floods every other year. Oh no, there's going to put 136 homes or whatever down there. So the growth is really bugs me, but by the same token, why I really am concerned about property rights. If you don't own it, you shouldn't really be able to tell somebody else how to handle it. So I really like understanding why we do what we do, and if there's something needs to be changed there, then I want to advocate for those changes that will be on the side of the property owner. And I have 4 kids. They're all pretty well close. And in fact, they're all at the ranch right now. One's came in from Wyoming. So we enjoy being here. I also manage the county fair, and I've done the auction for the county fair now for, I don't know.
No, you took over when Moses quit.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, just right after him. So we see the growth of that development in the valley, and it's been fun to see. And it's, nice to have that association as well. We had the auction yard for 20 years, and then growth basically took out all of the dairymen and that were supplying that auction, and it just wasn't viable anymore. So we had to close that, but we're still pretty close to the ag industry and the other things we do. So, Brady.
My name's Brady Christensen. I'm glad that we can visit and be together here today and hopefully accomplish something. I've grown up and raised in Richmond. I still live there today. I'm actually in the county, and I enjoy the opportunity I have to serve on that county planning and zoning. I've learned a lot. I echo what Lane said. I feel that property rights are very important, and as a property owner, but at the same time, with them property rights, I feel it's important that the county maintain or establish and follow through with the vision. If we want to keep open space, if we want to keep farms and ranches viable. It was interesting. I was reading KSL this morning. Top of the article when I opened it, 8 o'clock or 9. Growth versus quality of life. Is harmony possible? They had a similar to what we're doing here today, I guess yesterday at Maloof, that was moderated by Deseret News individual, and had the mayor Logan, had the university president. I don't know why they didn't have representation from the county there, but it's a good thing that we're doing this, and hope that it will be productive and long lasting for this county. My wife and I have 5 kids, and I really enjoy living in the county. I enjoy the open space that we have, but our world's about to change. There can be a lot of homes going up around us, and I'm not too excited about that. But I don't own the property, so I can't do nothing about it.
Awesome. Great. Well, it was so fun. Well, I guess I'll introduce myself. Lauren Ryan, the countywide planner for Cache County. So this is my full-time day job. I'm a Cache Valley transplant, grew up in Billings, Montana, big city. Went to school at University of Montana in Missoula, lived there for about 10 years. Got a degree in community and environmental planning and worked for the county up there. My husband brought us down here. He was offered a job, and I said, I don't know anything about Logan, so why not? Let's go. And so super excited to be here. And I love that after work, I can just go and be in the mountains, trail running, go hunting with my dog, go fly fishing. So I love the proximity to everything, and yeah, happy to be here and work with you guys today. I think this is going to be a really productive meeting. Chris, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we hopped in?
No, I think we can get started, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, a lot of what I've heard, we love the open space in Cache County, and so what's, how can we make some smart land use decisions to kind of, foster what we love and plan in a great way. So the goal of today is talking about the general plan process that we're undergoing right now. And I wanted to just outline what are the goals of today's workshop. Well, first of all, it's great that the Planning Commission and Council can get together. But overall, it's to give you all a chance to provide feedback on the draft policies in the general plan that you've identified as being the top priorities of discussion. I think most of you, if not all of you, had responded to that questionnaire that we sent out. So those are going to be the focal point of the policies that we're going to be talking about in detail today. And then also, we just want you to become partners in the general plan process, feeling confident in the plan that we're producing, and to really serve as champions behind the plan as well. So briefly, where are we at in the process? You'll see the general plan in the middle there, and then the urban and rural area assessment, regional coordination plan, which I'll go over a little bit as to what those are. But our main focus is the general plan today. So we're right at this phase of the draft plan review. We kicked off the process by identifying existing conditions in the county and hosted numerous kickoff events. We then moved to the visioning and community choices portion of the project, which identified the community's long-term vision for the county. And then from that, we went to the policy and development and implementation plan, which were developed from those visioning and values. And now we're at the final stage of drafting the plan. So here's a fun little analogy. I know that planning commission has seen this, but I thought I would bring it back because I think it was a hit last time. So this is kind of just a fun way to think about the planning process and what goes into a general plan process. And I wanted to use the local Fat Boy ice cream as for this example. So we think, we've got these broad ideas and visions from the public, and how do we distill those down into a final product that can be utilized by the community and is implemented. There's a lot of different steps and it can be messy along the way, but ultimately we hope to end up with a final product. And so to help you really visualize the product, Chris has brought some treats for everyone. And if you don't want them, maybe put them in the freezer so they don't melt over your
Yeah, if you don't want one, that's fine. If you want to save it for later. So has anybody been out to the West Point Dairy? I had a chance to go out there, kind of on a tour. And you will not believe that system and that process to get to a final product. It is impressive and it's intense. And that's sometimes how this feels.
Yes, something like that. Great. And so while you're enjoying your ice cream, hopefully everyone has their smartphones available, but we're going to do some fun questions. I'm sorry for folks not in planning commission and council. You'll skew the results, so you'll just get to watch and see. So here is, you can either scan that QR code or go to that website and enter in the code. And let me know when you guys are all good there, if anyone has any problems.
Anybody getting an error?
No offense to staff in the room, but I think this is for commission and council, correct?
Yeah, I just said that.
while I was asking for
Yep.
this.
No worries.
Scratch that from the minutes.
Yep. You can all see.
Mentimeter.
Yep.
With a cute heart.
Menti.com. Yep. Is everyone? If anyone needs help, we've got
Issues?
tech
You guys good?
assistants.
Site can't provide a secure connection.
We need to get on the Wi-Fi here, good.
It's,
I'm on the Wi-Fi and
a lot of them have
it's
just
error.
a heart that says the Mentimeter on it. It says instructions. Does that sound right, Lauren?
Yep.
Sometimes I have to turn Wi-Fi off.
Yeah.
My
Sometimes.
smartphone doesn't accept the Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi here in the building.
Oh, so if you're not. Here's
I'm on the
something,
guest
Gina.
one.
You're on guest
But just
Wi-Fi.
sometimes it doesn't
I'm
work
on my
because
own.
You're on
I
your
would
own.
turn
You might
Wi-Fi
have
off
to
and
turn
it's
it
not
off.
working for you.
I got onto it on the county Wi-Fi.
And if it doesn't work, use this.
Our Wi-Fi in this building is
What is it? Mentimeter?
Menti.com.
Really like your object lessons.
Okay.
Okay.
Hope it really
Did you get
sticks.
it?
Yep, taking off the Wi-Fi work.
Everybody else working okay? If not, I can let you borrow the iPad or.
We've got 10 out of 13.
Oh, it tells you.
Yeah.
Mine gives an error either way, but I'll just follow along.
Mike, even
Once
in
you
there.
get to that point, do you hit like the heart or something, or?
Stuck.
So
Yeah,
just
won't go past your screen.
Yeah,
Mine
just
Going
hit
all the way low.
When I
Yeah,
also
me
did the
too.
scan, they got the same thing.
On and off.
Just stuck there.
Can I try to kick you off the Wi-Fi real quick?
Sure.
Maybe try that.
This was all just an object lesson for the budget meeting tomorrow. That we didn't improve the tech in this room. That's all this was for.
Oh, there you go. Okay, perfect. Yeah, it looks like if you go, off the Wi-Fi, that seems to work.
If you have your iPod, tag use your iPad.
So you hit the heart, so.
If it says instructions, are they in a good
Yep,
place?
you're in the, yep.
Okay.
It won't prompt with a question until I go to the next slide, so.
So it says, most of the screens I see here says introduction to instructions.
Yep.
But it only says 10 out of 13 up there.
I think it only does that if people put the,
That's what I did as well.
okay. We're ready to go the,
Somebody find the like button. That's come on, that's cool.
No.
that's why it keeps, just, you can do thumbs down coming up soon, so.
Now your iPhone's coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you tap the heart 20 times, then it's fun. And then you watch more hearts go up on the screen.
Making a difference.
And it seems to work, if you're not on the Wi-Fi.
We pass these out as public comment.
Okay, I had that suggestion too.
Get their
Or
mouths
put a-
full, shut up.
No,
Put a
they won't.
Put a candy bowl
I'll
up
have
there.
something to throw at you.
492.
Yeah.
I'll get some half-eaten ice cream sandwiches.
That's why we don't do public comment.
Hey, just while we're waiting, you may have already introduced
Where we
them.
at?
Who's joining us today on the perimeter?
Oh, let's see, we've got Public Works folks.
These
Matt,
county officials are,
yeah, county, is everyone in the room county people?
Carly
With
with
the exception of
trails.
one. Sorry,
Jeff
this is
with
our
roads.
citizen representative.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right,
Does anyone else need to log in?
Are we all ready? okay, we're good? Okay, we're kicking off with a fun question first. Throw the easy ones at you first to get you warmed up.
Darn.
All right, got 12 responses, I think, is that, how many people did? Perfect. So looks like Vanilla is the winner. Chocolate. All right, we'll call Vanilla the. Wow, Vanilla, I'm surprised by that, but all right. Okay, great. Thanks for the entertainment there. We'll keep your phones open because we're gonna do more of those throughout the presentation. So, so I think everyone in the room has a general idea of what a general plan is and what it does, but just wanted to briefly talk about what it is. So a general plan is an advisory policy document that guides development of county ordinances. It doesn't change or create any regulations or requirements, but recommends policies and regulations as implementation strategies. So the purpose of a general plan is to provide policies, goals, and strategies to achieve desired growth patterns and vision. So the last county general plan was updated in 1998 and hasn't been utilized due to the lack of actionable items that were in that plan. And so there are elements that are required by the Utah State Code that are required within the general plan, including the moderate income housing plan and the resource management plan. And so this visual right here just gives you an idea of, we're working on 4 plans right now. Like I said, today we're talking mostly about the general plan, but just wanted to briefly touch on what these 4 different elements are. The general plan, regional collaboration plan, cost of services planning model and the urban and rural area assessment. So once again, that general plan addresses policies, goals, and strategies of the county, and the regional collaboration plan adapts and applies the information from the general plan to address collaboration and communication. And then the urban and rural area assessment and cost of services planning will serve as the technical documents that support the general plan and the regional collaboration plan. So the policies that we're going to be discussing today that you all chose which ones were most important to you to talk about or had more questions on will be based on these guiding principles. So the guiding principles that you see here will help to guide the framework of the general plan. And these have all been developed based on the public feedback and what we heard during that visioning phase of the general plan process. All right, next question. What is your favorite view of Cache Valley? So if you hop back on your phone, you should see the next question there.
Dave's butt's not on there.
I want more options.
Doesn't every view in Cache Valley is beautiful?
Counselor,
Yeah.
Good point.
any window you're looking at is beautiful.
Thanks,
You
Chief.
should see my neighbor across the street. I don't think you could vote for the last one.
Awesome. So we've got I think we can all agree that every view in the valley is beautiful. So that first guiding principle, heritage and stewardship, these are the two principles that had those highest ranking of what commission and council wanted to talk about today. So those two are to explore appropriate options that consolidate development and preserve the majority of land area for continued agriculture use, such as cluster development and transferable development subdivision alternatives. The second being plan for long-term water needs through conservation and water supply projects while considering water rights for agricultural lands and natural areas. So quickly, just related to water real quick, I just wanted to touch base on this past legislative session, a couple of bills that were related to water. So House Bill 121, that was a bill that provides incentives to replace lawn or turf with drought-resistant landscaping. House Bill 242 was that secondary water metering amendments, which imposes requirements related to pressurized secondary water. And then that last one, which I think is pretty key and that we talk about, or at least touch on today, is that water that's part of a general plan. So it requires water use and preservation element to be a part of a municipal or county general plan with exceptions, and also outlines how a water use and preservation element is integrated into a general plan and what steps to take in developing a water use and preservation element. So just wanted, I think, touch on these briefly. Obviously we can dive into those more, but just in relation to the water part, wanted to touch on those. So Tim, I'll hand it over to you.
We'll come back to water with another question.
Yep.
All right, well, I've had some fun drawing. And the intent of these drawings is to help us visualize different alternatives and options. The draft policy basically states to explore options, appropriate options for transferring development rights, clustering development rights, and accommodating development and potential land conservation or preservation. So we wanted to go through an exercise with you to see what types of land development and preservation options you might think could be appropriate and perhaps the most compelling. Remembering that in our general plan, we won't mandate any one of these in particular, but we could provide such as examples that we encourage to be studied through an implementation phase. So I'd just like to describe this hypothetical area, the existing condition and the context. You're looking at just over a couple of 100 acres here in this agricultural area. This area of county unincorporated area, 45 acres represents. a future annexation area of a nearby municipality. This represents existing growth in the municipality and the potential to extend outward and accommodate more growth. And let's just say, for simplicity's sake, that this might be a rail line or an infrastructure line, and it's less feasible or not feasible for the community to extend services past that point. That's trying to keep it a little bit easier. Okay, the next slide. We do want to acknowledge property rights, and we saw those in your comments, that the current property right with respect to development options is an A10 zone in this context. And on 211 acres, assuming there's not sensitive lands to be deducted out of the density calculation, that we'll just say 2021 development rights that could be developed on this property as the current property right. So what we're doing is just running through the options, and then we'll have you vote on them after we kind of run through them at one complete time. So there's quite a bit to analyze and absorb here. So the next image shows the first alternative, and this explores what if rezones from A10 to RU5 and RU2 continue in this area one at a time over the years, and the end condition is, and let's just say a average of 3.5 acre lots, 1.5 to 6 acre lots might be the result in this area. You also see the build out of a community up to this serviceable point with the baseline type of housing growth, suburban single family lots. These represent about 10,000 to 8,000 square foot lots. And what the 3x density increase is that these rezones result in 3 times the number of housing units above the A10 property right. And what we are seeing is a trend towards seeking more density to offset the costs associated with development, improving roads, bringing utilities, increasing construction costs, and so forth. So there's clearly there's a correlation between asking for more density and associated with the cost of development, or to consolidate development and use the cluster development option to build less roads in a more concentrated area. So the next option looks at what if A10 zoning was modified to allow for a density bonus to incentivize cluster development. This is a 1.7 density bonus factor, as you see here, 36 lots above the 21, or excuse me, 36 with about 15 above the 21, and roughly 70 to 78% open space. And this little buffer around the development represents the varying lot size that would depend on individual wells or group wells or individual septic systems and the soil types and the spacing requirements there. So,
Can I ask a question?
yes.
That open space, is that permanently dedicated open space?
Fantastic question. Thank you for that. Let's assume that a conservation easement is required as part of the ordinance update to place on that property as a permanent preservation. Okay.
Did I hear another
Another
someone else
question
had a
or-
question? No?
I was just drawing attention.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay, sorry.
Just a clarification on that conservation easement. That would be a voluntary requirement of the developer or property owner that in order to get the cluster housing, that the rest of that property without compensation for it was tied into open space.
Right, to get the density bonus, there might be a certain minimum preservation area and a requirement to place a conservation easement held by a third party, such as a land trust.
So then you have the scenario though that once that is dedicated as a conservation easement, what happens to it down the road? Which is a question that you probably don't really have an answer for now, because what does the future hold for that if you can't farm it, or if nobody around that wants to farm it? What does that conservation easement have authority to do with it?
Sure. Well, conservation easements do rely on an assumption or belief that the open space will be in demand for one use or another, agricultural or open space use. I think in very, very rare instances, if there is zero interest in agriculture and it becomes a nuisance of property and there's zero agricultural opportunity, I think there could be two options. One is to rescind the conservation easement, or to have it become a place for development, but to receive development from other areas that need to be conserved and transfer purchase development rights into a future receiving area. So there are options that could be conservation friendly.
Kind of like a wetlands deal on the purchase or
Correct.
transfer.
And we will look at a few transfer options. So thank you for these good questions. Let's look at option 3. This is similar to option 2, but it is more of a rezone to RU5, but with a cluster development requirement that yields pretty much a 2.3 multiplier in density, which is 48 lots on this 200 plus acres. And the placement of the cluster development is depicting that there are multiple owners, each applying their own cluster development of the density in this area. And we also see the city growth. Okay, now, and so you see less open space. Instead of 70-80% open space, we're 60-70% open space.
But you got less impact of houses on that, right?
Correct.
What's the percent on that?
Can you go back? The percentage of?
Houses being down compared to that, you're going 1 times, 1.5 times, 2 times, and 3 times, right?
Yes, that's 1.7 or 36. The next one is 2.3 or 48.
Okay.
So basically 12 in each corner. That's the way this is depicted.
And so, Tim, this is fewer feet of road than the original one. Is that
That's correct.
the infrastructure
Thank you
is
for
less?
reminding me
Is
to
that what that is?
state what I was to state, and that is that each of this does reduce the infrastructure and the road miles or road feet per unit. Yes.
I guess this assumes a perfect development pattern, that we have equal sized lots and that everybody wants to develop equally across the board. You know, that's the application of this. I love the concept, but the actual application is a lot messier than that when we start laying it out onto actual development.
That's a really good comment, and in an effort to anticipate some of the differences in goals between property owners, the next alternative assumes that owner B does not want to participate. But let's say that owner A, or owner A could be 2 or 3 property owners that want to work together and perhaps be closer to some amenities and services. And the cluster development options in this scenario are expanded to allow for a cluster or a transfer so that the development rights can hop up across a piece of property to a non-adjacent area, probably within a certain proximity. So it's not too far away, such as probably not from North Valley to South Valley, but perhaps within a, who knows, half mile or reasonable proximity. But owner B does not need to participate in order for owner A or group of owners A to consolidate development in one area and preserve an area to avoid building infrastructure in more than one area, and consolidating development and consolidating the open space in the agricultural lands. Okay. This is just showing that this cluster / transfer, and I call it kind of a light transfer, flexible cluster, could apply to the RU5 or the A10 alternatives that we're looking at. So it's 4A and 4B are these alternatives. And then the last alternative is transferable development rights. And the assumption here is that there could be a municipality or a new community that's established and serviced with water and sewer and necessary utilities to accommodate higher densities, more compact development options such as smaller lots, single family, townhomes, maybe even some condos that are in greater and greater need and demand of residents either looking to stay in the valley or move to the valley and take jobs here. So this 45-acre expansion area or annexation area, what if the municipality said, we recognize the need for different types of housing options, but we'd like to work with the county unincorporated area and set up an interjurisdictional transferable development rights program where developers can buy development rights from property owners and increase the density in this area above what has been developed in the existing community in the past. And then perhaps the homes that you see here could be developed at 1 unit per 20 acres, such that 85 to 90% of the agricultural ground remains in that production and that use, but there's still some estate lot development associated with that agricultural use. And so again, this could be associated with a municipality, or it could also be identifying a new community location where public water system and different type of sewer or group septic systems could be explored to accommodate that density. But it's not to just create this and allow the RU2 and RU5 rezones, but it's to create this density option with the transferable development right.
Tim?
Yes.
Are you thinking that that area in the red dotted line would be then annexed by a city to provide services, or would the county still retain it and attempt to figure out how to provide services to a dense area?
As depicted here visually, this implies a city annexes and provides the services. But if you visualize this type of receiving zone, a new community in a brand new location, and there were new utilities and service districts to support with those services, and it could be a new community. A lot to talk about and explore there. So, any other good questions?
Is that less road doing it this way? Or are you saying road goes around the perimeter of?
This somewhat assumes an existing county road. The new roads are those that would extend into that open space area. And here, obviously, this is a higher cost per road foot because it's more urban and it has the utilities and streets and so forth. However, more housing units means that it certainly pencils out, and the per housing unit cost of infrastructure much lower here than they are here, and certainly lower than they were here.
Tim, really quick question on that,
Yes.
because I think maintaining the least amount of roads possible is a fantastic thing in our budget. But we have, you mentioned services, sewer, water, things like that. When we try to cluster the development in the county, we've got a pretty hard cap on how much we can actually densify, don't we? When we're not offering any services in an unincorporated county. I mean, we have it by land use, but water and septic fields and things like that are going to be a constraint pretty quick, are they not?
Correct. And so in an effort to recognize that it's hard to predict the exact minimum lot size, as it really depends on soil type and where's the water to be found in the wells. Are group wells utilized up to 4 or 5 homes to not exceed 25 persons per well and become a public water system? And individual septic systems are assumed here. There is an option to explore a public entity that could accommodate a sewer district and allow for group septic systems, which utilizes land more efficiently. But this was an attempt to show probably the smallest lot sizes possible with individual septic systems and maybe a mix of individual wells and group wells, which we have seen approved for recent development, especially in the RU2. And those would be important provisions in an ordinance update. Any other thoughts or questions?
Hey, Chris, so our next phone polling question is going to be related to these scenarios. So if anyone has any questions, Tim's also got, the questions get really small. And so if you need examples of what any of those development patterns look like, the names on the bottom there go from the first one we discussed to the last one. But feel free when you're ready to vote on your phone and we can continue the discussion from there. And if you have any questions.
You wanna vote multiple times for different areas.
What was that?
Depends where you're talking.
Aye.
If you're next to,
Yeah.
if it's always next to a city, it's different than if you're in the middle of
Throw
the.
that.
Chime in on that.
Like 4 different.
Which we can definitely have that discussion, but for this purpose, we'll. All right, got 8 in there, and need a couple more in there.
I think to clarify is RU5 cluster transfer development could apply to the R18 cluster as well.
Right, so I think we're just looking for one more. There. It looks like so far that, perfect. I think that's everyone. Great, so kind of a mix there. Looking like RU5 cluster transfer development. I heard a couple depends, right, on where. So I'd open that if anyone wants to chime in on kind of where they see.
That one in the definition, that would only work if you had an entity willing to provide services.
If there's demand.
And so most places in the county, that one currently is harder to work.
And then every
Depends on-
time the planning
Yeah.
and zoning tries to get a city or community to talk to the county on something, it's not happening.
Yeah, I think the development transfer is, it's kind of a countywide regional collaboration conversation point, and that a municipality could see the trade-offs. Do we want to upzone to the higher density that's in demand, or do we want to upzone it with basically a condition or a program in place that they can buy that density and we get the benefits of living with some of the surrounding area preserved as agriculture? So whether it happens or not, to be determined, but at least to know whether there's interest to start the conversation, I think is the key aspect.
You know, that number 5 on that, that's basically Holland. If you're on all the reclaimed land, you know, when they built the dikes and everything, all those lower lands, they came in and their theory was that we are going to tight knit everything, and they had kind of defined boundaries as to what a town could literally go beyond, it couldn't. So in order for them to increase in population, then they had to, from outside of there, transfer some of the old timers' development rights to those towns, so that they've turned into totally townhouses, row houses, what we call them. And that's why it works in, highly density areas and in spaces.
It's an interesting comment. What's interesting too is that even though we have a lot of land and a lot of space to grow here, the incomes that, many incomes can only now afford a townhouse, even without land constraint. And we all know the variety of factors and supply chain issues, availability of lumber, labor are constraining the ability to produce the homes relative to the demand. And so the same percentage of folks that could afford a single family home on a 1/3 acre lot or 1/4 acre lot 5-10 years ago is smaller today. And the demand and those that could afford a townhome or a smaller lot, single family home or a condo is a greater percentage of the housing market. So it's interesting dynamics in play.
Any other thoughts or comments on this before we move to the next question?
So I work at a city, so tell me that conversation, when you approach the city like Hyde Park, on that RU5, that transfer development, what are you saying? What are you giving to us and what are you asking for from the city?
I think there's, if you go to the next slide, there are two approaches that could occur here. And one approach could be that the city just states that with each new building permit, there's an open space fee that has a very specific purpose and intent. And the purpose and intent is to buy development rights from willing seller property owners. That takes away some of the complexity of having to go out and find development rights and negotiate those. It's just a fee and it goes into a specific TDR fund, purchase of development right, transfer development right fund. It's called a fee in lieu of transferable development rights. The other option would be that between county and city, there are development rights certificates issued. And there's a formula for that, and those are issued. And this is what Mapleton City did on their bench areas. They issued property owners along the bench a certain number of development rights certificates, and then they could choose when to sell those and how much to sell them for. And those Mapleton Mountain area, bench area development rights have been sold into a higher density, and I call it moderate density, townhomes, smaller lot, single family, and some commercial, but they created a town center closer to the town core and emerging growth area. And that's how they've been able to preserve harder to develop bench areas that could eventually develop. So those kind of those two options.
So transferring into these development rights, is that, maybe I missed it, is it within a certain region or is it anywhere in the county? So, Bell's have a 5,000 acres in the south end of the valley.
Yes.
Because those development rights be transferred from there and Logan expands exponentially.
A city ordinance or a city-county interlocal agreement and ordinance could establish what's called sending areas. And that's where the development rights are anticipated to be sold from. And then receiving areas where the density is appropriate and desired. And there are techniques to transition the density from the highest and then have a more compatible or perceived compatible lot size or use type adjacent to existing growth areas. But that's part of setting up an ordinance, is to understand the rough successful ratio between the number of development rights to be sold, potential development rights sold from the sending zone, and then the potential demand to receive buy into a receiving zone.
Seeing we look at this, and as we've gone through Imagine Cash, we've looked at various things. There are certain areas that are definitely more valuable to preserve than another area. And so does that go into the calculation at all and say, wow, here's this sensitive area because of whatever, so we want to give that more value than another area, or you get where I'm coming from?
It's a great question, and I think that
if we preserve areas that are not highly valuable, are we getting anywhere?
I asked something about this, and I have to give Sean no credit for this because this is his idea. But he was talking to me about this idea that you preserve it for a certain length of time, say 20, 25 years, and then after that, it can come back up again for possible development. And that could be the answer for,
I had that same question as well. Or is this
preserve
development, is that forever?
Yeah.
Or is there a certain time limit, and we say, we know there's going to be development in the valley over this time. Well, let's push it back in this area for 20 years or 30 years, and those landowners get to enjoy a certain amount of money out of that. But when that time frame goes, well, then we can relook at it.
Because that housing might be needed again at that time. There might need to be a development.
I say that's interesting that you said, because when you drive out to Benson and there's all that clay ground between the airport and till you get out there to the corner of Benson, and nobody cares much about that ground. If you built a house on that,
it's close enough to Logan. Let's make the Barrens out
yes,
out there, right?
Yeah. So but why would you preserve that But then down that ski park that's gonna go down along the river, that with a few more trees would stay beautiful for people to walk through and enjoy the outdoors right out of Logan city limits. So you would have to score that and say, well, what's that worth? Because it's right close to Logan, but if you're gonna tear all those trees down and build houses, wouldn't you rather build those houses out on those clay flats in Benson and preserve that space downtown? But then you have 25 years from now, maybe we want to build houses in that space down by the river.
I know that gets really messy, but I
Yeah.
think the practical application is what we would find is, you know, a developer would come in and they would go out in the washboards in Clarkston and say, hey, let's, you know, you want to transfer your development rights out there. Well, sure, I'm not making any money on this ground anyway. There's a landfill there. We're not gonna make a whole lot of money on it. Sure, pay me money for that, and then maybe we just increase density where we really don't want it.
I think that's where he was getting at. Most cities wouldn't put that area in their sending and receiving zones. You know, because it doesn't do Hyde Park any good to preserve ground next to Minden. So you would, with the county, you would define, each city would define their sending and receiving zones, probably fairly close. You know, Logan might go to, 2000 West, something like that. Hyde Park might just go to the airport fly zone, you don't want to go past that. But so I think you would define those areas pretty regionally. Each city would have their own, I would anticipate, because otherwise you'd go for the cheap stuff, but that might be good to preserve in 100 years, but not yet.
Thank you, Nate, and Sean, follow-up comment.
So the thought I had behind what I'm gonna call RTDR, the recurring transferable development rights, as Gina suggested in this 20-25 year, there's a couple of reasons. But before I get to that, Jason's question about how you assign the value to different land types. County Council last night had a really great example along these lines on slope for a reason. And it's a good perspective to say that just like slope ordinances might have a limited amount of developable potential, you'd have the same thing. Like if we value wetlands and want to keep the wetlands where they are, there's some natural seeping springs on a piece of property, you would assign that a lower density than perhaps the other developable land within a 200 acre tract or something like that. So that would be kind of done by a jurisdictional basis. But another rationale I had for this RTDR concept, as I was thinking about it a few years ago, is the thought that generational farms find it increasingly difficult to compete against the big producers. So what's their incentive for not selling out either to homes or to something, and just the last crop was a crop of homes? The thought behind it is that every generation at 20 or 25 years gets another bite of the apple. Farm equipment's really expensive. But if Pa has sold that, and Pa goes out and buys a bunch of new farm equipment, that's the last apple they can get when they've sold out some acreage. What happens in 20 or 30 years when that equipment needs to be replaced again? And they have no other bite of the apple. The monetization of the land by selling it to a conservancy district is all eaten up. Conservancy districts love that approach because they got theirs, but now the land is pretty much of de minimis value. It will either just be farmed by that family, but the family has no means of getting money out of it because at commodity prices, the product you sell is just enough to live off of. It's not enough to live off of and replace really expensive equipment. But every 20 to 25 years, in addition to how Gina correctly mentioned that part of our conversation too, not only could a community have a desire, like you said, Lee, that land, maybe you do need to expand to it. And now you have an opportunity to do it without the cumbersome nature of having to undo a conservation easement, which can be very politically charged and very expensive. You just have a naturally expiring contract that the county recorder can record, but the government doesn't need to be in the middle of this pricing mechanism. The free market can decide that on its own, because a developer will say, well, this 200 acre parcel in Benson is governed by the unincorporated, the county, versus 200 acre parcel in Smithfield has different density types. And is there, just like you can transfer water rights within an aquifer, the same kind of paradigm. I mean, there's clearly a lot more details that can be fleshed out in the meeting, but this governing body could also decide our development rights in one part only transferable to another part within a region, not just anything goes in the whole county. Right?
It's
And
very-
and it gives another generation an opportunity to then sell the development rights when it expires. And they now have the opportunity to either multiple siblings, cash out, or to renew it and sell the development rights again and have more money to either keep it open space or to keep farming it, but have the money and liquidity to go to the market and go buy some new hardware.
And to the same token, it gives the community an option in 20 years to re-vote and say, yes, this is a piece of property that we value having as open space. And if not, then the developer buys the property.
Bill, you had another comment?
I'd like to see more on transfer or the TDRs, because almost to what Sean's saying, based on where the property is, the TDR might have a higher value than another place for TDRs, if you're talking about playground or whatever else. And based on the value of those TDRs or the community accepting that, because I'm sitting here looking at your illustration, that TDR is sold to the developer, so the developer passes that back on to those citizens who built the house right there, right?
Yeah.
So if, in a sense, it almost seems that the TDR comes with some fluctuating value based on what the community is or where the location is as to how that goes. Am I seeing that right?
Correct. It's market driven, but certainly the local governments have, they establish the influence that supply demand for the TDRs in terms of how much density would a community be willing to accommodate and generate that demand to buy the TDRs. And is there a density bonus for the developers to encourage them to buy the TDRs? All kinds of formulas can be looked at.
Well, you're almost gonna have to assign some of that TDR money to the community, because many communities right now don't have the ability to provide those services, sewer, or water, or whatever else. And you're taxing the community to do that. So I like it, but there's some constraints there too.
Certainly not a fit for every community, but as communities expand and grow, what kind of urban shaping and edge relationship would they like to have with the hinterland? And so there's some real conversation and decisions to be made. With respect to the creative idea of RTDR, reoccurring TDR, Sean and I have had some good conversation about this, and a couple of thoughts. And one is just to make sure that the first generation of TDRs for sale are mostly extinguished and sold, because if we have second generation RTDRs competing with first generation, it starts to create an oversupply relative to the demand. So it's again a supply demand. Will cities or new communities be established where the density is required to be transferred in, and can that demand keep up with the supply of first generation and recurring second generation? So it requires thought and analysis, but it starts with a vision, and that's what we're exploring today. So, great.
I just had a couple of quick thoughts. So what do we call them? Transferable development rights, conservation easements, whatever we call them. The valley's done some in the past. And the thing that I feel is extremely important moving ahead is it's one thing to sit with a group like we have here today, but what happens when either the group around us or the group here moves on to the next phase and you get in new blood? Are they still going to see the same thing? Some of the conservation easements of the past, in my opinion, don't benefit the valley. They benefited the producer at the time, but extreme south end of the valley, you're up Blacksmith Fork, those conservation easements aren't keeping our valley space open, and they're not benefiting the people. The other thing too is, in addition to our development rights, is identifying our natural resources, such as gravel areas, so that these areas aren't developed and built on. Once they're built on, you're not going to have the resources, versus if you were to have some way of compensating people to hold out, harvest the natural resources, the gravel and such. and then develop it afterwards.
Okay, interesting thoughts there. Are some of the mountain area conservation easements tied to watershed protection and other things that?
I don't know how
I think it has
100%.
more to do with the property values. You could buy, clear up the canyon there, you could buy 100 acres and preserve that 100 acres as opposed to 2 acres down here in the flat
Yeah,
somewhere.
But I know that them funds are extremely sacred and have been. I mean, they're even difficult, impossible to come by. And so when we take this pool that we have at the time and put it in those 2 areas, we've just eliminated further options to purchase maybe in the valley amongst communities that would benefit the majority of the population versus 1 or 2 producers. Just one final thing, if you don't mind me just quickly saying too. I would want to know more detail on if we put it on like a 25-year deal. Because if we pay premium dollar today and only tie it up for 25 years, again, we have to think about, because however we do it, whether we tax, whether whatever, we sell the rights, it's still a limited resource. And the only way we're going to keep open space is to be able to buy it. And so if we're having to buy it multiple times, that's not really fair to the people that may have space somewhere else that's still valuable to the people, but there's not going to be funds available because we've only done a 25-year deal on this piece and already paid a premium on it.
You know, instead of a set time frame, it could be certain conditions in place. X%, 90-something% of first generation TDR sold, and there are new receiving zones created that create sufficient demand to absorb the next generation of TDR. So if it's less specific years and more about those types of conditions, maybe that works, Sean.
And another thing, Brady, you made me think of this a little bit differently, and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify. What my vision of an RTDR is the private market assigns the value to, I'm just gonna call it Farmer Susie and Developer Bob, okay? Farmer Susie's got 200 acres, and Developer Bob wants to use what is on a general overlay on the 200 acres. Maybe it's an RR5, a rural residential 5-acre limit. And so you've got 40 possible lots. And Developer Bob has an agreement with Logan City. I'm just gonna hope for the best here and say Logan City will get on board with something like this and be a receiving zone for it. And say, well, Developer Bob, you've got 10 acres here, and by this overlay we've got, you could build 20 units. But we have an agreement with the county through interlocal agreement, and you want to preserve this open space, and we think a lot of our Logan residents love the surrounding area, even though it's not in our jurisdiction, will be a receiving area for those 40 units. Susie and Bob determine the value of that. Susie's just saying for her family's sake, for 20, 25, it could be 50 years. It doesn't really matter. It's immaterial. The county as a government entity just becomes the recorder of the document to make sure that they can verify when the contract period started. Susie negotiates the price with Developer Bob. Developer Bob has to figure out the pricing unit per residential, you know, what he thinks he can sell it for or rent it for. And he buys those 40 development unit rights and adds them to the 20 on top of the parcel he's got in Logan and goes ahead with his construction of his project. Now we know as a community, broadly said in the community sense, that acreage for 200 acres of Susie's farm is locked up, presuming again for a generation. The bite at the apple is for Susie's family or heirs, or maybe she's still alive, to assign the value. So the thought of paying a premium is between the developer and the landowner, not we having to step in to assign what that value is. And if the developer thinks the premium is worth it because he can sell it on the market, that's the market answering the question, not us having to interfere.
Fantastic conversation, very valuable feedback. Time check.
Yeah, I mean, we're only on the first item and we're about at 4:30. So, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of interest in us exploring that within the general plan. So thank you, but let's keep rolling. Okay, so another phone question for you. So let's talk about water a little bit. So prioritize, you've got 5 options there to promote water conservation.
Second option ties to lot size and the demand, the amount of water required to irrigate larger lots versus smaller lots. So there's less water use per household with a smaller lot.
For some reason, mine's only, it's not showing what you're showing.
Well,
It
if
says
you click on it
prioritize the
once,
following
Brady,
options. Well, water.
click on it once, and you'll pick your first choice, and then it'll come up again.
Does that work?
Click on which one?
Just that one choice it gives you there.
There's a tug of war going on between canals and conservation pricing.
So I'm just got one more left. So for those, so we're almost on. So for those who chose other, I'd like to hear what, for those who, I mean, that's last. So does anyone have any other thoughts that aren't listed here on the screen that they'd want to throw out there as an option? No? Okay.
I think one of the big things on water is it's not anything that this group can handle. It's really at a statewide level, and it you know, involves how people are able to use the water rights that they have, and where farmers are, you know, they really need to show beneficial use and continue to use that, and they don't have options to you know, to lease that water right out. And I think there are things that can be done where we can preserve more water, but I don't think that's anything that this group can handle.
Right. Great.
Somebody can advocate for that.
They have actually made it, but you can now do that.
Nolan, did you have
Really did it pass?
Well, I'd like to, I posed this to our county attorney, because he's talked about, I mean, we've said on the planning commission, we have no talk about water rights and what goes on, but the county attorney is saying we need to start looking at that. So I think we need to get the county attorney to sit down some of this water issues and see what can be done, because as P and Z knows, when the subdivision comes, we don't get to talk about water, but the county attorney is saying, okay, that's something that needs to be started looking at. So that's part of my other side as well, is that we talk about some of those things and focus on how many wells. I mean, the clustering is interesting, but I get concerned of clustering in too many straws in the glass, so to speak.
And I will say, any developments we approve in the county, the little straws they're putting in don't matter compared to the Nibley and the Logan. The 18-inch straw, we can put in every single home straw there is, and we don't, it's not a drop in the bucket. And so there needs to be a better, and this is my other side, a better overall groundwater management plan to manage that, and not the county say you can't build there because one well is gonna make a difference. We need to have a better groundwater management plan that says maybe no more wells, you know, at a certain.
See, that's what I'm saying, we need,
But,
there needs to be
yeah,
some talk
but I
about it.
think that the county saying we're not gonna approve a home, it's kind of hard to do if a city's building an 18-inch well that pumps 3,000 or 4,000 gallons a minute, and the home won't use that in a day.
Yeah,
But
great.
it's gonna take some coordinating.
Yeah, sorry for the peanut gallery, but Nathan, would there be a difference between, say, somewhere like Benson that's in the county that's providing water service, or Cove that's in the county providing water service? Maybe they're not a Nibley, maybe they're not a Logan where they're pumping a lot, but more of some type of community type water system like those in the county as opposed to a whole bunch of little straws?
Well, we met the other day and started that discussion of maybe in certain areas of the county that does need to happen. Some new water providers need to be formed, potentially in water stressed areas of the county. We should be laying a water pipeline across Valley View because we're gonna need it someday. We might as well lay it while they build it, but I don't think we're gonna be able to. But yeah, that does need to be looked at.
And I believe the state code allows the county to be a service provider of that, if I'm not mistaken.
Great. Great thoughts. Great.
As you talk cluster development though, maybe there is a threshold at which we go from each lot needs to provide their own well to once you reach a certain scale, it needs to be a community water system.
See, those are the things that we need to be dealing down into there, so that
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into our next one, which is regional collaboration. And after all this serious talk, we're gonna have a fun question. What form of collaboration do you prefer? And so you can see the full photo. I had a little bit too much fun. Chris said I could do the fun questions, so. Oh, we got some skydivers? Who's gone skydiving in this room? Anyone? Want to try it? No skydivers yet? Some trust falls in there. Maybe next council meeting? Trust falls?
I think they won't hurt as bad as skydiving if something goes wrong.
It's not the citizens that we're trusting to catch us.
There you go. All right. Well, thanks for playing on. Great. So, we talked about, with the idea of TDR's collaboration with our municipality. So the next guiding principle is regional collaboration, and you guys identified improving coordination between the counties and cities to work towards a more consistent development standard. So I just want to talk a little bit about what the county's doing in terms of collaboration efforts. We have 19 municipalities in the county. One of my roles in this countywide planning position is to work with these municipalities and serve as a liaison between the county and these cities. And in the last couple of weeks, I've heard from multiple jurisdictions that there's a real want and a need to collaborate with the county and cities. And how do we do that better? As I mentioned earlier, we are working on that regional collaboration plan as part of this. So that'll be an element of the general plan. So we'll really dive into more of that. But just as an awareness that there's a want and a need to collaborate and a need to do that better with our communities. And so what is the county's priority when collaborating with municipalities and other partners?
Can everyone read those? I guess on the phone. What's the say? Top 4?
Yeah, and I think you can choose, I think this gave you 4 options.
Top 4.
Top 4.
You can try 5, and if it doesn't work, you're limited to 4.
I'm concerned that the highest priority isn't even an option.
What's your highest priority?
Well, maintaining private property rights. There isn't even an option there.
What's your other?
That can be your
No, I
own.
mean, I think our reflection on that was that that's just a given, but like we wouldn't ever intend to not respect private property rights, but I appreciate you
Well,
raising
yeah, we've heard that. I've heard that before.
Was it, depicted in the open space options as an established A10 right and then increasing that right through potential ordinance updates and rezones and so forth.
Great, so right now it looks like water conservation, land use compatibility, transportation, open space, all equal. Great. And
That's
then
saying bright minds think alike.
I know you guys are all collaborating. Look, all were in agreement with those, so you passed the test. Let's throw another fun one in there. I feel like this made me skip some slides.
Transportation and economic development.
For the
Be in the right order as transportation.
yeah, for some reason I feel like it's on me
So that folks get that work, so keep them alive.
Awesome. Okay, so that was a kickoff too. So in terms of so regional collaboration efforts, I kind of touched on that one lightly just in the interest of time, knowing that a lot of that is going to be developed within the regional collaboration plan, but recognizing that there is a want and a need there. So for valley connectivity and transportation, the policy being coordinate between communities, so another type of collaboration to align streets, infrastructure, and establish right-of-ways for future road connections. So we have our Trails and Active Transportation Master Plan, with Carly being the regional and active transportation. She works a lot with communities to align future connection for trails, active transportation opportunities there. So that's one thing that the county is doing right now in terms of active transportation. Carly, do you want to add anything to that?
I would say in addition, we provide technical support to our smaller communities to help them work towards their own plans and our regional connected network vision.
So great, alongside Carly, we also have Jeff, who's here too, I think. Yeah, Jeff's fine. Jeff is the CMPO. 1.5.
I don't know CMPO.
And so on the right, you see this is the and Jeff, I can let you add more to this, but this is the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. And so the policy, really works to, we need to align and work with municipalities for some of these future critical roadway connections and corridor connections as well. So Jeff works hard with our municipalities to help make those future connections, but it's something that we need to be working with communities to make sure some of these connections happen. So Jeff, did you want to add anything?
Well, I'll just mention that what you see there is kind of our project list. So that means we have to fiscally constrain what we can build in the next 30 years, and that's what that is. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the whole network. In other words, that's just what we have focused on as the highest priority in terms of investing in regional mobility. But the whole network comes in with, like what Matt has done with the countywide transportation plan, or what the cities do and trying to knit that together. And because that's just as important. There's roads that we can't afford to build, but they're still important that network build out. So I just want to mention that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and Matt, since you're here, if there's anything else you want to add to roadway connectivity.
I think Jeff said it. That's been one of the things that's been a little frustrating in my position, is that jurisdiction is in the county, and as the cities grow, and so I think the COG Transportation Master Plan, working with CMPO and all those entities, I think we're getting to a point where we are starting to have that cross connection talks with Hyde Park, North Logan, Hiram, all those, so that we can plan out those. I think we're in a good state in the county, or a good position in the county, but I think we just need to keep moving that forward and be, in your position, my position, Jeff's position, we always need to be reaching out to the local cities and working that coordination, because as they grow, they start shrinking, and the county's left with some little teeny dirt road between two big cities, and we can't afford to put all that traffic on our roads either. So it is collaboration between all those communities.
And we're going to be meeting with all 19 cities. We pushed, or soon to push out a request to make appointments where we're going to go visit all the cities. And Carly and Jesse We're even involving transit in that to go visit with them. It's just kind of a listening session to try to pull some of this together, leading into the CMPO plan update and also the COG master plan update.
What's the timeline on that?
We're hoping to do it through June. So we set aside Wednesday evenings and Thursday afternoon as kind of available slots, and we're gonna have the city schedule it out for us.
Question on both of you, as you look at the transportation part and you see what are state roads, does the state ever come in and say, based on size, there's another road that the state takes over, or is that never happened?
So one thing we can do, and the CMPO plays this role, is we can plan a road and say, we envision this as a state facility, and it's within the fair share of what state funds ought to fund. This is not unlike what other places do for Mountain View Corridor or West Davis Corridor, because we can anticipate a certain fair share of those state funds. So yes, we have a Western Ontario plan, where we're starting to talk about, and we envision that as a UDOT facility. And it's well within the fair share of what we should get from UDOT. So it doesn't mean that we still have to advocate it and beat the drum and lobby for it, but it's within the fair share of what we could get. So the other option is to do a jurisdictional trade. Those are harder. We did that with 10th West. We traded a whole bunch of what were state roads, but they kind of devolved into more residential roads, and UDOT didn't really want them. So we did kind of horse trading with UDOT. Said the locals will take over these roads, and you take over 10th West. You got a great deal because they put $90 million on that too. But you can do that too. You can do strategic jurisdictional trades with UDOT. They're a little harder to do because it has to kind of meet the definition of a highway that UDOT operates on.
Jeff, when you're meeting with those municipalities, could you send me a schedule of that, and maybe some of us as council members could join you? Would that be okay?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Trying to think how best, maybe I can just share the calendar with you.
Okay.
And you can kind of pick what you want to do.
Okay.
Are there others that would like that?
Hyde Park City's meeting tonight, 6:30. This same kind of a meeting about our general plan.
And are you going to get
Yeah,
that
I'm part of
scheduled?
that. That's not actually, we're gonna hope that meet in addition.
Okay.
You know, what we're saying is to the cities, figure out who you want to meet, whether it be a city council person over roads, or if they have staff, whoever wants to be to it. And then we're just gonna come to them and sit down and say, what are your priorities, what are your needs, kind of thing. But I'm plugged into that general plan we write for Hyde Park too. So I'll be there tonight. But that's kind of a separate, we're meeting individually.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, so, and speaking of Hyde Park, just wanted to throw, so this is just a total concept plan, but thinking about connectivity, Hyde Park had the thinking of this is Wolfpack Way. What does the connection look like through Hyde Park potentially? And making that connection happen. So just thinking once again, how do we work with municipalities? How do cities work together to have a transportation network come together?
Just a quick additional thought on this. So countywide planning, we had the opportunity to support and work with Hyde Park in exploring this concept, but it explores more housing units, more diverse housing units, commercial development mixed together, creating additional demand for an urban trail and pathway along that Wolfpack Way, and then potentially limiting access along Highway 91 for safety and promoting cross access parallel to the highway to improve safety and flow on Highway 91, but then provide that parallel redundancy a few blocks east and then similarly on the west. So this is just an example of how local land use planning can be coordinated with county, with UDOT, and between municipalities.
Great, thanks, Tim. All right, moving from transportation, we're going to talk about recreation. Before we do that, here's another question. How effective are the county municipalities and other partners in working together to plan for regional transportation corridors and networks?
Well, can we throw a joke in there? We hope it's more productive than the garbage arrangement,
Then the garbage arrangement?
and that's for
Fair.
serious,
Fair.
very serious.
I didn't throw that in there as an option, so I apologize.
We'll note that as another.
Yes.
Yeah, mine, I would say the county's very effective, but some of the municipalities are somewhat effective.
Okay. Thanks for
Mine would be split.
Great. So I'm not, yeah, well, somewhat's not too bad. Great. All right, now I think we're talking about recreation. So what's your preferred form of recreation in Cache County?
Love the cat.
Hopefully doing a little bit of that after the meeting. I don't know what type of chips those are. San Antonio salsa chips. I've never had those Lays before, but. Wow, no sitting on your cat. Wow, we've got no watching Netflix. All right, that's fair. So active lifestyles and recreation, the group identified 3 priority policies. So first one being protecting the recreational scenic values of the canyons, national forests, when considering development in mountainous areas, using open space for multiple purposes, trails, riparian areas, protection of agriculture, and keeping open spaces between our growing communities. And the third one being to explore potential public and private funding sources to manage open space, bonds, tax impact fees, private land trust, and grants. And so before I hop to that one, just wanted to recognize a couple things. We've talked a lot about different development options with the form of TDR and cluster. That really helps to help preserve some of our open spaces and critical habitat areas. And some of those alternatives will really help to guide how we protect these critical lands in the county. Also in the form of recreation, I showed the Trails Master Plan, recognizing that, trails aren't gonna exist everywhere in the county as much as Carly would maybe like that they were everywhere in the county, but that there are proper places for that type of use, and the Trails and Active Master Plan identifies where those areas are.
And require willing property owners.
Right.
To establish those trails.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. So this next question will, we already got one response in there. I think that was from earlier today, but prioritize these tools, those ones that I listed out in that policy, to protect agriculture, wildlife habitat, recreation, and other critical open spaces. Like we got TDRs at the top, cluster, sales tax increase last.
We brought up the RTDR kind of concept in that open space meetings, and it was not accepted by the agencies.
Wendy Fisher with Utah Open Lands was not, once the development rights are purchased with some of the open space bond money, there is no reoccurring opportunity to resell those, and she mentioned that. So it was unfamiliar to her, and
Well, yeah, they're just looking at different things, and it's because they're using their monies kind of and their funding sources, but where the ones we talked about would be bought by developers, those type of agencies wouldn't be involved.
And it's all in how the conservation easement is written. I think if a conservation easement recognizes that there could be conditions for a recurring TDR at some point in the future, then all those things could be pre-anticipated.
Just out of curiosity, we're in, and I know a lot of times farmers or landowners aren't the most willing to come out to meetings, aren't the most willing to participate. What effort was made by the committee, or how many property owners were actually contacted and their input put into these?
Right, to help form the policies that we're looking at
Well,
today?
even like on a question like this.
Yeah, so the policies that you're seeing were brought directly in a survey, reflected in a survey similar to the one you took to identify which items we wanted to talk about today. And so we, in terms of efforts for outreach, we mailed postcards of directing people to take the survey for everyone in the unincorporated county that owned over 5 acres. And that got around 2,000 landowners roughly. And so,
That was on the kind of the discussion we had with Nolan Gunnell. And there was a real concern there, the same that you expressed, that we contact those farmers.
Because at the end of the day, they're the
their-
ones that control
yeah,
this. We
their-
can give an idea, but
Yeah, the concern was that they may have been missed or didn't participate in the initial surveys. So there was a specific approach to contact all those people.
So you got 2,000 responses or sent out 2,000 notices?
sent out 2,000 notices. We had around over 1,000 responses on the
Just
survey.
from
So
those 2,000 or overall responses?
overall,
So you
I
could
would
track
say,
them to those.
yeah, I would say from the postcards, I think I did, and sorry, this was back in September, so I'm remembering. But I did like a rough count of who responses we got, and granted, not everyone gave their name, but I think it was probably around like 70 or 80 people out of that. So
We encourage folks to identify a zip code and their name, but many chose to remain anonymous.
So, yeah, great.
Then there's a couple of challenges with zip codes as well. You have, Smithfield, 84335 covers Smithfield, but it also covers a lot of unincorporated county as well.
I'm in Roseland, my sister was through the orchards in Wellsville.
Yeah.
Yeah, you live out in Logan, but across the road is Wellsville.
Watch mine. Okay, my sound's all the way up. This one's gonna wake people up. Did it prompt you on your? Oh, look at all the fun little.
Stay with us for 10 more minutes.
Keep everyone going.
I don't know what this is from here.
Don't know what wild card I threw out. Anything else, Ryan? Got 9 people on there. All right.
is this supposed to be prioritize these schools and agriculture, wildlife,
No, you might still. Will it let you hit next on there or hit submit?
No, it says enter your name.
So it is, yeah.
Well, there's one that represents me.
Sure, magical light.
Oh, I see.
All right, we're losing people.
Got it.
All right, I'm gonna hop forward. Oh, 13. All right, we're almost there. I'm gonna hop forward. Okay. To the question, oh, there we go. Look at your phone. Money, I don't know.
Oh. I did it wrong.
Throwing you guys off. All right, time's up. We had 2 in there. Casper's ice cream and technically Pepperidge.
It's split.
It's split. It was supposed to be the one to throw you guys off.
Claim another ice cream bar.
I don't know who these people are. Apparently they gave you a random. I don't know who the winner was, but whoever Earthman is, does it tell you who Earthman is?
You have the logo on our phone.
Oh,
I was
who's
Kathy.
Earthman?
Oh, you're
Well,
Kathy.
I am not coming to this again if I'm Kathy.
I swear it was random.
Whatever.
It was not random, Nolan.
All right,
I
all
mean, my
right.
camera says that I'm an ugly guy, but Kathy's really ugly now. I must be Paul's neighbor.
Oh, God. All right, thanks for playing along with it. Yeah, but see, it keeps us going for another 5 minutes. All right, last but not least, on this wasn't on purpose, but economics. Identified talking about affordable housing in the county, and the reason I prompted that question is recognizing that there are a lot of businesses in Cache County, and Sean can probably speak to this a lot more eloquently than I can. But so identifying options to include affordable housing, detached accessory dwelling units, twin homes, multifamily, and also to protect our surrounding farms, and identifying where appropriate commercial use types are. And also to, once again, talking about coordinating with local governments to locate where those commercial uses go. So this is just a little clip of our future land use map that is also a part of the general plan. And we've identified some of these areas you see in pink right here as being potential future commercial corridors, really where you have major transportation routes and potential growth areas. And so, Tim, do you want to walk us through these next slides that we're going to talk about in relation to housing for these businesses?
Sean, can you give us a 30-second statement of the importance of housing for employees, for businesses, and related to business growth and opportunity to grow or relocate?
I'm here to tell you.
But only 30 seconds.
I was like, I'm in a timing if this happens.
I can go back to the little questionnaire timer with the music.
Nope, I think that's good.
You just used 20 seconds. No.
I'm gonna quote Ivory Homes CEO Clark Ivory: "Jobs are homes, homes are jobs. If we don't have a place for people to live, we're not gonna keep job moving."
Great.
Okay,
That was impressive, Sean. Yeah, good job, Sean.
You
Kudos
just
to
moved out
you.
of the peanut gallery, so.
So these images that you'll be voting on reflect county-wide, not county unincorporated necessarily, but wherever existing communities are growing and could absorb growth or potentially new community. But this is much of what we've seen in the past is your 10,000 square foot. This is about 10, 11 acres, 37 single family homes. The next image shows a bump up in the number, 59 units, smaller lots. They're all single family, amenity space created as an incentive for that density bonus.
Private amenity space or public?
This most likely private, but sometimes public, depending on how the ordinance is negotiated. The next option is a mix of single family and townhome, and maybe even a little condo or apartment element. And so your total units bump up to 72, still an amenity space. And then the final option is still a mix, but starting to bring in more town center elements with mix of single family, townhomes, similar percentages split between those, as well as condos or apartments, and some commercial.
Great. So once again, before I prompt the question, this is just to get, obviously this type of development, isn't probably going to be seen in the unincorporated county areas, but how do we help to house this workforce of people that we have moving to the valley, giving a diversity of housing options? So out of what we just showed you, they're all going to go in order from the first one to the last one. Which neighborhood development option best accommodates both business growth and the need for employee housing countywide? Oh, I took them out. Yeah. Great. So seeing a lot of votes for that mix of townhomes, condos, single family, recognizing that the reality is now a lot of the single family homes aren't affordable for people, and the need for more diversity of housing options, but also some single family lots with open space as well.
Is there any comment on that, even with the latter two options? As far as location within a community, I know we've experienced in the last year some controversy between a couple of communities. One community allowing mega density right on their border, impacting the neighboring community that was less dense. This cuts into open space, everything else.
Right. Yeah, and I think are you just looking for a general kind of comment on?
That's a general comment. I
Yeah.
think they're good ideas, but I think the location is still important.
Right.
Location and how, and what kind of shaping and open space elements are accommodated at the same time?
Where's the appropriate location for these type of developments and uses? So
I think one of the problems that I see, every time you hear the word density in today's world, you need to almost equate it to large-scale development. Because anytime we use the word dense and you look at what's been developed, the amount of capital and that needs to be in place to develop something, just the Mill Creek thing, prices everybody out. And to say it's affordable, this is people with huge amounts of capital looking for returns. But if you can get density and mixed use to say, okay, I can put in a small house, little storefront next to it, and you can incent smaller scale development at a much higher land use intensity, I think we'd be a lot better toward affordability. Because just because you can put a lot of doors on a small piece of land, if it takes a lot of concentrated capital to do that, it won't be affordable, period. Name me a big, large-scale development that is actually affordable. There's not one. No matter what they say, they'll set aside a certain percentage for affordable housing. Most of them are market rate, which are not affordable, because all that affordable housing, you only see the cost increase. It needs to be less capital intensive while intensifying the land use.
Right.
Off my soapbox.
No, that's great.
Well said.
Yeah.
Nope.
So what do you want to?
This is just a question that could be, it's intended to be applicable to the county unincorporated area specifically. And it's just an acknowledgement that our current code allows for an attached accessory dwelling unit, whether it's in the basement or attached inside, but does not allow for a detached. And this is just a depiction visually. And I tried to get the same brick on that detached to just pretend that it is designed in good taste. But what do you think about allowing for a detached option, which we are hearing consistently an increased interest in detached accessory dwelling units?
Can I ask a question before I answer that?
I have a question too.
If you allow that, is it ever separable down the road in a sale?
As long as the code remains single family, it would not be.
Oh, that's not true. You can go to the county and separate it, but it may become an illegal building lot when you go to develop it or build, or put a shed or something. You can have anything you want recorded.
Right, but I'm just saying, because if you're saying it's an accessory dwelling, then you're saying that it's same ownership generally. But I'm looking at, yes, same parcel, but I'm looking to use split the parcel to become different owners down the road. That's where I get concerned.
And how to manage
It's case
that.
by case too.
And that's my question is along those lines too. At what point, how large is that structure that you're actually have two units on a 10-acre parcel? And then how is that not changing the zoning?
It is typically limited to a couple of bedrooms at the most. And the square footage that relates to that. Our current maximum is 1,000 square feet.
That's what we just did in Hyde Park. We've had ADUs for a long time. We just barely added the detached, and we've got a max 1,000 square feet.
You said that's we have that in our code. Was that just recently changed with the change in the legislature last year?
The state
Or
chose that last year.
because I didn't think we had that.
The Hyde Park does, Cache County.
Cache County does
Oh, you
not.
guys don't? I thought the state said
Yeah,
But
everybody
the code
had to.
changed last year,
We have
correct?
the accessory dwelling unit, we've already had that, the state changed, we were ahead of that curve. So we didn't have to make any changes, but that picture that Tim just showed us, we allow the accessory dwelling unit if it's within the home, attached to the home. Just
And does it have to be owner occupied?
No, one of them has to be owner occupied.
And that's what my purpose.
So
Is that a conditional use? Or is it just an allowed
We
use?
allow ours as a zoning clearance, if I recall.
So just for maybe if you don't mind, whoever put no on this, maybe just some clarification, or if there was something that,
I won't be bashful, I put no, but it's like anything else, it gets abused. We give it, so if I'm and I've heard from many farmers, boy, they'd like to put another modular or something else on the place because they're having a hard enough time finding employees, let alone getting them close enough to the place of employment.
mhm,
So in that scenario, I think it's amazing,
mhm.
but I don't know, it just, I need a little more direction to wrap my hands around it in
Okay.
every scenario, just to flat open go for it.
Okay.
That's me,
I
because
agree with that.
there's people that are building pool houses and letting people stay there, so I'm like,
Yeah.
that's a different accessory dwelling unit, so that's why my question comes, yeah, that's why my question comes down to splitting and down the road and everything else, because, well, you could have used that additional dwelling unit.
Yeah.
That's-
And so I'm, yeah, yeah.
It is, and that's why I'm concerned with it, because just like Brady says, we open it up and then we're like, what the flip?
Yeah, and so some of the concerns too, maybe one of my other questions, which I know would open, I can't, but just in terms of potential for allowing for like an Airbnb in the county. It sounds like some of those maybe same concerns you're addressing with ADUs, that they become Airbnbs potentially, and just something to think about of, I know would there probably more of those popping up in the county, and how are we gonna deal with those in our code moving forward? So since we're out of time, I'm gonna skip over this last question, but just to get people thinking into what role does the county play in providing more housing options? So just a thought, so we can jump over that. But so in terms of what's next, these plans are all gonna be in a story map format. I think most folks are familiar what story maps are, but we're seeing a lot of long-range plans move to this type of format. They're a lot more interactive for people instead of just a stagnant PDF document. We're also going to have a PDF as well, but we find this format to be a lot more engaging. And when we need to go in and make any edits, if there are any, it's easier to do. So just an awareness there of kind of final formatting of the plans.
In a bigger group setting, don't use that picture of those gals.
That's the worst picture.
Yeah, we're having trouble with that one.
They're Paul's neighbor.
That's on 3200 West.
I didn't choose that picture.
I chose the picture.
Yeah,
Whoa.
Carly, I'm pointing the blame to Carly on that one.
I'll take the meeting.
In her
Awesome.
defense, I don't know one cow from another.
So wanted to open up to any questions, but also the next steps are gonna be, we're gonna be coming to bringing draft plans to the planning commission that will then make a recommendation to the county council. So I know we're past time, but open to any questions. I hope today was informative, helpful. I think we had a really good discussion, so I appreciate everyone's participation, both in the serious questions and in the fun questions. Kind of nice to break things up a little bit. So thanks, everyone.
Let's give Lauren a hand. Thank you, Tim, too. Thank you, everyone, for, thank you, great presentation.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
We'll take follow-up comments via email or phone calls. Please
Yeah.
share any follow-up thoughts.